and I mean Westbrook also kind of hated Foster, but obviously, like,
Well,
you could
yeah.
hate them both. Yeah.
Let me read the part just after this because it addresses that. It says that, funny enough, Colston Westbrook had condemned Marcus Foster back when DeFreeze was attending the BCA in Vacaville. How about that? Westbrook even called him, quote, a fascist. A completely nonsensical charge, ignoring the white racism Foster diplomatically battled within the school district. As DeFreeze was given more of a role within the BCA by Westbrook, including delivering speeches to other inmates and visitors at the meetings, he mimicked the fiery and baseless rhetoric of Westbrook against Foster. Clifford Jefferson, Death Row Jeff, referred to Westbrook's verbal assaults on Foster as, quote, murder-mouthing, whipping some inmates into an emotional frenzy. The Pacific News Service reported, quote, according to Bay Area journalists with connections on the left, and according to a group of activists who split from the SLA last fall, Foster had been marked for assassination by the SLA last summer. So in summer of 1972, or I don't know if they mean summer of 73 or 72, the mission to eliminate Foster was initiated well before any discussion about security in Oakland schools. It must be remembered that Donald DeFreeze spent nearly 3 years in Vacaville when the average stay was usually only 60 to 90 days. As a prisoner, he was neither aggressive nor political, and yet he was administered Prolixin and then rewarded with the right to deal marijuana and with highly irregular sexual visitations with followers Hearst, Soltysik, and Perry. Colston Westbrook chose him, not because of any polished political rhetoric or commitment to ideology. DeFreeze was seduced to serve the state because he had already been a snitch for the LAPD, and in the dangerous world of prisons, that role is a rare one. Donald DeFreeze was not a wild-eyed prison revolutionary, suddenly committed to killing Marcus Foster, a man he knew nothing about until he met Westbrook. As KQED and the Chronicle reported, his first actions after an engineered escape were to offer his services as a hitman to radicals, and then reverse course and try to enlist radicals to kill an unnamed target. Those he encountered instantly suspected him of being an agent provocateur. The most fascinating psychological question is not whether DeFreeze was manipulated, but at what point he knew he was expected to personally kill Foster. The moment came after his failure to enlist members of the radical left in the Bay Area. His vitriolic naming of Colston Westbrook as a CIA asset in the April 3, 1974 communique can only be explained as an act of furious, if ineffective, retribution. DeFreeze's condemnation of his former friend, Westbrook, was that of an informant who felt betrayed and was likely threatened into a criminal act and then abandoned. It was the kind of scenario Robert Hyde, Fred Braswell, and Damien Tomita all anticipated when they refused to be involved with the SLA outside of prison walls.
I mean, that could be true, but he also could just be, like, totally off the rails at this point and just, like, striking. Like, obviously he had some kind, like, a little bit of, like, a kind of, like, a narcissistic, like, resentment against, like, a lot of different people. And, like, he obviously had, like, a need to be, like, people who, like, in whom he saw himself, like, in any way. It kind of makes sense, actually, like, he would be, and I mean, even based on his past, like, it totally makes sense that his, like, main targets and the main targets of his anger would be, like, other black men.
Yeah, well,
totally
Marcus
fits his, like, psychological profile. Yeah.
And it seems almost in a way like, if anything, they were going to, if they wanted to train him to be anything, it would be this kind of ultra-left revolutionary that just coincidentally happens to assassinate black figures, like, more often than, actual right-wing figures or anything like that, and be able to hold that identity in your head and, like, withstand the cognitive dissonance of that. And maybe that started to break down later on with Westbrook, where he realized that he was sus.
Yeah, or, like, yeah, exactly. Like, well, I mean, I think Westbrook, who denounced who first, Like, was it Westbrook who criticized the SLA but first, or was it,
I suspect that, because Westbrook was giving media interviews, again, I've had a tough time, like, tracking down, like, the OG sources of these, but there's a lot mentioned, and
I feel like since it was the media, like, firestorm, it must have been in response, right?
I think that because Westbrook published an open letter to Sing Q and also held a press conference, like, addressed to DeFreeze, like, and I think that was earlier on. It was only April 3rd, one of their final one of I think Sinkyu's second to last tape. I think I misspoke last time when I said the naming Colston Westbrook and playing like the national anthem in the SLA, whatever, where he sounds quite suicidal and almost like he's saying goodbye to like his children and everything. That was his penultimate tape. There was the one after the bank robbery where he makes his final statements, and then he was killed after that. But that's kind of late in the game. I mean, that's almost 2 months after Patty Hearst is kidnapped. So I think, after honestly, Westbrook, like, I'd love to get the original full text of like what he was saying, but he's kind of like taunting Synkyu in this pit. He even made his after I think the death threat, he changed his answering machine to like, this is Colston Westbrook. I have not yet been assassinated. Like, I await my death and to be reunited with the General Field Marshal. Thank you. Like, he left this trolly voicemail message on his answering machine at home. Because he was, put extra locks on his doors and was like a little sussed out. But
did you? This is from that New York Times article. Actually, this is by Sarah Davidson, who I mentioned before. That interviewed Westbrook. It gives like some background on him. There's like some little funny details here, like that his license plate is Ngombe. He sort of engages with this topic. This is after he has already been denounced. Breathing hard, Westbrook takes a beer from a brown paper bag. He is a burly man wearing a black and white knit cap with a tassel. He seems to thrive on publicity, on playing verbal chess with reporters and drawing a cloak of suspicion and innuendo about him. He speaks 6 languages and will receive a master's this June in Black English dialectology. It's a brand new field, my own field. I made it up, he says. And this is where he has his famous Vietnam quote where, she asks why he went to Vietnam, and he says, money, why else? I was told by the American embassy in Tokyo I could make $10,000 working in Vietnam. They said it pays to be black in Nam. He smiles. I've never been a torturer, but I know how to do it. I know how to cut a cat's throat. We talked about this before.
Jesus Christ.
Westbrook was teaching at Berkeley in 1971 when he was asked to work with the BCA. He ran classes on inmates and everything from Swahili and nation building to astrology. They opened with a flag ceremony, the tricolor of the Republic of New Africa. Yeah.
Right. That was Betty Shabazz was associated with that group. They're technically still around. But yeah, he had a very ritualistic opening by playing like the Republic of New Africa anthem and like marching out with like the flag of that group and kind of creating almost like a ritual space of
this is kind of a weird little exchange that he has. He said it's the white women in the he explains that he worked with Cinque and he says he never had any trouble with him. It's the white women in the SLA who were against me. And the reporter says, I asked why. They accused me of taking lewd pictures and sexy-looking black women wearing high miniskirts into the prison.
This is the lesbians were mad at me and had it out for me comment. I think we read that in part 1.
Yeah. Right. He says, that's why those lesbians were mad at me. And she asks, who do you think is controlling the SLA? He gives me a hard stare. You really want to get me in trouble, huh? Nothing's changed until they find out who's controlling this. There are people who haven't come out of the woodwork yet. I know. That's why they want me dead. Is it a man, I ask? As far as I know... someone known to the public? Yes, he finishes his beer. At the right time, you expose your hand. He waits a beat. There's a theory that I'm number one, because I haven't been killed. I tell him I'm no good at these games. Are you really a reporter, he asks? I'm wondering myself. How would you like to join the CIA? You'd be a natural. As I'm leaving, he suggests I visit a psychic he knows. You might break the story, find the head of the SLA. If I did, I say I'm not sure what I would do. Tell me. No, I wouldn't tell you. He leans forward, eyes wide, and whispers, how do you know I don't already know? Really, yeah.
He's
he's kind of laying it on thick.
Yeah. It almost makes me think that he wants to, amp up that he's, the puppet master of the SLA, more than he is. But, at the same time, I don't know. This guy's...
Yeah.
He's got friends in high places.
Must be amping it up more than he is. There's something weird going on because you don't do that. That's so it reminds me of that I forget what was the name of the guy who claimed to have killed Kurt Cobain, or heavily implied that he did. He was in that band.
He was in some kind of blah 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 kind of band.
And he loved
his Facebook page.
Exactly.
All
he
about
went by
I
Randy
did it.
Devil or something. Kind of that's that episode because I've totally forgotten.
Alan Wrench. It was Alan Wrench. That's who it is in the chat.
Exactly.
Yeah, they
Randy
told
Devil.
us.
Close enough.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of that, the kind of like like kind of innuendos.
He's
Because
such an LOL on CIA. He did it to Stephen Weed too during their strange meeting.
Yeah.
Like he loves being like LOL, like without
I think
like
it is
expressly
an
denying
LOL
it.
CIA situation of like not knowing like who you actually work for. I feel like that's
The nervous laughter of somebody who
and
doesn't
that
know
kind
who they
of
really
tracks
work for.
with having been in like PA&E and like that type of thing, and like kind of just like weirdly go. It's possible that he's like not the real chess master.
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget. I looked a little more into him, kind of a shadowy figure, but like Reagan's counterintelligence advisor, William Harriman, who had connections with SRI and had been an LAPD captain during the Watts riots and was a counterinsurgency expert and was in the Phoenix program as well during Vietnam. They might have even crossed paths. He allegedly, according to Schreiber, is the one that like picked Colston Westbrook to start the BCA at Vacaville and give him this whole project. Came from William Harriman, from the heart of like Reagan's like counterinsurgency Phoenix inner circle. So maybe he was pulling more strings, like
probably like he probably
there's very little
like,
info
knew
about
what
him.
kind of person like he was. You'd have to know that he was like on the level, or that like he would be trust, and to allow him to like do something like this, like for it's I mean, we've talked about this, like it's really insane.
Well, listen to this a little more about like the timing of this and how if they really were a left group, it couldn't be worse. If the intent with the Foster-Blackburn attack was to prompt reprisals from white radicals in the Black Panther Party, there would be few more emotionally potent times than 6 days after the murder of Tyrone Guyton and on Election Day. The execution of Foster was intended to create a politically charged war in the Bay Area, one that police and the FBI would be given free rein to violently quell, finally pacifying that tumultuous political landscape. Those on the left who briefly aligned with the SLA rescinded their support after Foster's death. The article Ex-Symbionese Send Letter to the People was published in the February 22nd Berkeley Barb. They said, "We are ex-members of the Symbionese Federation. We resigned collectively from the Federation immediately after the assassination of Dr. Marcus Foster. By resorting to abstract violence, the SLA not only separated itself from the rest of the revolutionary movement, but became the example to avoid, the stereotype of the mad terrorist so indispensable to our oppressors to put us down even more with new laws and restrictions." That's pretty right on. I think, they were like, okay, this is sus. No, like we don't, we're not fucking with this. Knowing the SLA was prone to violence, these former Federation members admitted they were in hiding to avoid reprisals. Echoing what other radicals said to KQED in the Chronicle when DeFries was looking to hire them to be a hitman, the letter went on to report the estrangement they felt when they first agreed to be involved with the SLA. They wrote, "Serious conflict developed over the subordination of the support units as of all non-military activities of the organization to the combat units. That is, the quote army came to be seen as the chief agent of the revolution. We began to suspect that the War Council was manipulated either by some local right-wing organization or the CIA itself. The secret decision to kill Marcus Foster and its execution confirmed our suspicions." Yikes. Okay, so they're getting CIA vibes. Oakland Mayor John Redding and other Republicans, as well as local writer Ishmael Reed and Congressman Ron Dellums, who later helped protect SLA prison organizer Robert Hyde from getting a lobotomy at Vacaville, all came to the same conclusion. Foster was killed for daring to compete in white mainstream society. But despite general suspicions about the CIA, FBI, or other unnamed right-wing organizations, no one investigated the origin of the SLA, Vacaville, and the BCA. And the murder of Foster led to more tragedy, the conviction of 2 SLA members who did not fire any weapons. Right, so then we get the arrest out in further out in the East Bay. New Times Magazine interviewed Bill and Emily Harris and Russ Little and Joe Ramiro in 1976, and co-writers Robert Scheer of Ramparts and Susan Line, his partner, were told categorically that Little and Ramiro did not fire upon Foster and Blackburn. "I found out much later," admitted Bill Harris, "that Nancy Ling Perry and Ms. Moon and Sin were the ones who carried out the action." Little went on the record as a prisoner stating, "Who actually pulled the trigger that killed Foster was Ms. Moon. Nancy was supposed to shoot Blackburn. She kind of botched that, and DeFries ended up shooting him with a shotgun." Patty Hearst, at her trial, testified that she was told by the Harrises that Little and Ramiro were in a backup car in case they were needed. And yet, according to the rules of an army that never exceeded 10, Ramiro and Little were sacrificed, soon to be jailed as murderers rather than as, at most, accessories. Bill Harris denied they were at the scene, saying in an interview, Hearst has testified that it was Ms. Moon, Nancy, and Sin who shot Foster and Blackburn, which supports Russ and Joe's innocence. But then she lied and said that Russ and Joe were in a car outside as backup. After the shooting of Foster and Blackburn, Willie Wolfe approached the Harrises, Little, Ramiro, and Angela Atwood and asked them if they wanted to be a part of the SLA. They agreed, and Perry drove them in a van to the safe house in Clayton in the East Bay, where DeFries and Soltysik awaited them. I went to school out by there in Concord, so I'm pretty familiar with Clayton. It's a very funny place to have an SLA safe house. It's like very normie, like middle-class suburban kind of environment, and it would be one of their, huge strategic errors, I guess. So they all, they all went into Clayton, asked if they wanted to be in an above-ground support unit or a combat unit. They all chose the latter. The last time all 10 of the original members were together was on New Year's Eve 1973, when Camilla Hall finally joined the group. They planned to have the Harrises, Atwood, Little, and Ramiro move to the San Jose area, financially supported by a, quote, people's garage, to be run by Ramiro, a mechanic. It was another idea overruled by DeFries, and it was one that might have saved the lives of 6 people. Nancy Ling Perry, using the pseudonym Nancy DeVoto, rented a 3-bedroom house in Clayton near Concord. The $31,000 house was in the center of a cul-de-sac at Sutherland Court. Neighbors who were questioned for the study on the SLA prepared by the Committee on Internal Security in the House reported a strange event shortly after the attack on Foster and Blackburn. On November 11th, 3 months after the house was first rented, a boy of about 16 knocked on the door, confronted Perry, and asked if her husband was home. When she replied in the negative, he pulled out a .22 caliber pistol. Perry quickly reacted, shoving and kicking him. The boy fired one errant shot and fled. He was later apprehended. With a history of raping women at gunpoint, he had chosen a female revolutionary, not afraid to kill. That's crazy, too, that in this, sleepy suburb that a young man, who's a serial, rapist, home invader, tried to do that on their safe house. But, the neighbors and they almost get exposed because of this. The neighbors called the cops, right. And Perry basically, wouldn't let anybody inside the house, told everybody what happened. Yeah, so they were not discovered, luckily. Russ Little looked back at the location on Sutherland Court as an error in judgment. Quote, the SLA should never have had a safe house in Concord because we didn't fit into that middle-class suburban community. The SLA was driven out of Sutherland Court due to circumstances and bad planning, in keeping with the lack of discipline often shown by the ragtag group. So this is the first big incident, law enforcement clash with the SLA, January 10th, 1974. Russ Little and Joe Ramiro drove around looking for the house, unfamiliar with the area. For some reason, they were without a map. Their orange-red Chevrolet van was highly conspicuous in the quiet suburban neighborhood. At 1:23 a.m., Officer Dave Doog in his unmarked Dodge Polara spotted Little at the wheel, driving 10 miles an hour. When Doog circled back and flashed his semi-mounted spotlight and honked once, the van pulled over. Doog was told by Little that he was looking for a friend named DeVoto on Sutherland. Little handed the officer his driver's license, which had the pseudonym Robert James Scalise on it. Ramiro also provided his license, which had his actual name. Doog learned that neither name was connected to outstanding warrants. But he had also radioed in the last name of DeVoto, the false name Perry used. There was no directory listing for that name for either Sutherland Court or nearby Sutherland Drive. Doog suspected the 2 tense men, who did not seem relieved to get directions in the middle of the night. He asked Ramiro to step out of the car, and when he did, Doog asked him if he had any guns or knives on him. Not getting an answer, Doog told Ramiro, "I'm going to frisk you." Ramiro took a step back. Doog testified he saw Ramiro go for a gun on his right hip. Ramiro testified that Doog moved quickly behind him and that Ramiro thought the officer was going for his own gun. Ramiro leaped in front of the van, firing 2 quick shots. Doog took refuge behind his own car. I drew my pistol and returned fire, 2 shots. I fired at the muzzle blast. It's very similar to flashbulbs going off in your face. Duke moved to the left rear. Again, Ramiro fired twice, and Duke returned fire. Little was still in the van. Ramiro squeezed off one more shot as he ran off down the street in fear, and Little squealed away in the van. Duke called in the incident. The two cars responded immediately. The van had to make a U-turn and came straight at them. The officers blocked the street, pulled out shotguns, and demanded Little surrender. One of Duke's shots had penetrated the van, gone through Little's right shoulder and out the windshield. Little surrendered, his wound bleeding profusely. The .38 used in the Foster killing was recovered along with great, they're carrying around the gun that was used in the Foster killing, and it gets recovered, along with a 9mm rifle and a paper bag filled with SLA leaflets printed in brown ink on a yellow background. They had been reproduced at a Gemco department store. The paper bag was emblazoned with the name of the store and the words, America's Finest. Officers began a manhunt for Ramiro. This is a little odd. He was caught between two houses on Sutherland Drive at 5:31 a.m. and surrendered. He had the Walther PP 380 with him, used in the shooting of Foster. Neither man had bothered to get rid of the murder weapons. Either Joe Ramiro wandered around for 4 hours trying to find the Sutherland Court safe house, literally about a block away, or he did in fact find it and reported to DeFries and others what had happened. Rather than giving up their location or all of them surrendering, DeFries probably sent Ramiro back out as a good soldier to surrender. The police never bothered to track down the so-called Devoto residents, and neither Little nor Ramiro gave up their cohorts. Yeah. So it's weird that if that is true, though, that's speculative. But if it is true, then why did Ramiro go out with one of the guns used in the Foster killing and get caught? You think it wouldn't be not as bad for him to go out unarmed and then maybe get caught and then couldn't quite prove it. Well, the other guy had one of the guns, but I didn't have anything to do with that. Instead he's caught with the second gun that was used. That seems, I don't know. I mean, or maybe he did get turned around and didn't know where the house was and hid for 4 hours. But either way, the SLA figures out. They hear the police and figure out, oh shit, something bad happened. So they frantically prepared to leave Clayton. Bill and Emily Harris were notified and did not report for their jobs that morning, going underground. At 6:15 p.m., a white 1967 Oldsmobile belonging to Willie Wolfe, who was visiting his dad in Pennsylvania, backed out of the driveway. A 6-inch fuse burned between the attached garage and house. Perry had scattered gunpowder and splashed gasoline from a 5-gallon can on the floors and walls. At 6:21 p.m., the Concord Fire Department was called by neighbors who saw billowing black smoke. The windows were closed, and due to the lack of oxygen, the fire did not consume the house. It was put out by one hose. Yeah, so then
supposed to melt the fingerprints, right?
Right,
Yeah.
but then ends up with tons of documents and plans and plan to kill the pigs, written everywhere, and weird shit. Perry later explained the attempt to burn down the house was an effort to melt fingerprints. Instead, the Concord Fire Department got a huge cache of evidence, including the plan for the Foster killing, boxes of bullets, cyanide, maps, bombs, including 6 Molotov cocktails, and over 100 clippings from newspapers and magazines of the exploits of revolutionaries all around the world. Perry, in her introductory letter to media outlets on behalf of the SLA, explained their historical perspective. She tapped into the despair many felt after the assassination of President Kennedy, claiming it had been a military coup that blatantly destroyed the Constitution that some of us still believed in. Not wrong. As with future communiques, Perry cited shameful American historical events, but rather than suggesting specific remedies, the SLA abandoned the idea of working within the system for any kind of significant change.
January 1974, 20 minutes.
To those who rebel the hopes and future of our people, let the voice of their guns express the words of freedom.
Greetings, my comrades, sisters, and brothers. All love, power, and freedom to you. I am very glad to have this opportunity to speak to you, even though I know that what I am feeling cannot be completely expressed in words. My name was Nancy Ling Perry, but my true name is Faiza. What that name means is one who is victorious, and I am one who believes in the liberation and victory of the people, because I have learned that what one really believes in is what will come to pass. So, my name is Faiza, and I am a freedom fighter in an information intelligence unit of the United Federated Forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army. When I was in high school in 1963-64, I witnessed the first military coup committed against we, the people of this country. I saw us passively sit by our TVs and unconsciously watch as the militarily armed corporate state took over the existing government and blatantly destroyed the Constitution that some of us still believed in. I listened to the people around me deny that a military coup had taken place and claim that such a thing could not happen here. The people that I grew up around were so politically naive that their conceptions of a military coup only recognized those that have occurred in South American and African countries where the military and ruling class took over the government by an open force of arms. But the method of taking over the government was different here. Here the coup was simply accomplished by assassinating the then President John Kennedy, and then assassinating any further opposition to the dictator who was to take power. That dictator is the current president, Richard Nixon. In 1964, I witnessed these and other somewhat hidden beginnings of the military corporate state which we now live in, and I heard my teachers and the government-controlled media spread lies about what had happened. I saw the civil rights protests, the killings and bombings of my black sisters and brothers, and the conditioned reactions of extreme racism in my school and home. When I questioned my teachers about how these occurrences related to the meanings of democracy and freedom that we were told existed to protect us all, the answer I got was that we were better off not knowing the truth about what was happening. I told my teachers and my family and my friends that I felt that we were all being used as pawns and puppets, and that those who had taken over the government were trying to keep us asleep and in a political stupor. The experience of living in America has since taught me the realities of what fascism, imperialism, and genocide mean. And I have discovered the truth about the military takeover and the police state dictatorship, not because I studied about it in college, but because I see it every day, and because truth is something that is honestly known as easily as beauty is seen.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.